cardiovascular system has three components: the heart, the vessels, and the blood. So today we'll talk about the blood. Now the blood is made up of formed elements and plasma, so two parts. And if we were to take a tube of blood, this is a centrifuge tube, and fill it with blood, and then spin it or centrifuge it, and that spins it very, very fast. And what that does is it separates out its components. So the heavier or larger molecules will go to the bottom, and the lighter material will go on the top. And so when we do that, we centrifuge this blood, we divide it up into its components. The upper portion here is made up of plasma. Now plasma is like 90% water, so mostly water. It's got salts dissolved in it, waste. It's got proteins, plasma proteins. The albumins are plasma proteins, fibrinogen, important for clotting, globulins, and regulatory proteins, enzymes and hormones are all part of this plasma, this clear portion called the plasma. In between the plasma and this lower portion is a small layer called the Buffy coat. The Buffy coat is made up of leukocytes, or white blood cells, and thrombocytes, which are important for clotting, so the platelets. This bottom portion is made up of erythrocytes, and this is the red part. Erythrocytes are red blood cells. Now, when we do this, we can get an important number called the hematocrit, and the hematocrit is just the percentage of formed elements in the blood. So, a normal hematocrit for a person would be somewhere between 45 to 55% of the blood would be mainly erythrocytes and the other formed elements. All right. So let's take a look at the formed elements. Okay, and there are three main formed elements. And the first one are the erythrocytes. The erythrocytes are red blood cells. And if we were to take a red blood cell and turn it on its side, it's a biconcave disc. In other words, it's thinner in the middle than it is on the ends. And it's also very flexible. If we look at it from the front here, it almost looks like a donut without the center punched out. Another thing about erythrocytes is that the mature erythrocytes don't have nuclei. They lose their nucleus to make more space to do what it's supposed to do, which is to transport oxygen. They live about 120 days. They're about 7.5 microns as far as width, and that allows them, they're very small, so they can fit like single file in the smallest vessels in the body, which are the capillaries. They transport oxygen, and it does this through a protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is made up of 4 protein chains called globins, and which in turn have 4 heme groups containing, in each one of those heme groups contains an iron atom. And when it has oxygen bound to it, it's a very bright red color. And if it does not have oxygen, if it's deoxygenated blood, then it appears very, very, very dark red, almost purple looking. So when you look, through your vessels, you can see almost blue. That's the very dark deoxygenated blood. Erythropoiesis is the production of red blood cells, or erythrocytes. And it makes erythrocytes through the production of a hormone from the kidneys called erythropoietin. So if there is a detection in our body of low oxygen levels, our body in turn will send that information, or the kidneys gather that information, and it secretes the hormone erythropoietin, which will allow our bodies to make more erythropoietin, which in turn causes more erythropoiesis, and we get more erythrocytes. When we go up in altitude, go up into the mountains, our body detects that, okay, hey, there's not a lot of oxygen up here at high elevations, and so we in turn will secrete erythropoietin and make more erythrocytes. Now people can use that to cheat when they run races, marathons, etc., or biking, etc. there are hormones, synthetic hormones called EPO that you can inject, which will cause your body to make more red blood cells. And of course, more red blood cells mean we transport more oxygen. More oxygen means we can go farther. Another thing that's illegal, blood doping, is to remove red blood cells way in advance of a race and then re-inject them later on, right before we race. And that way, again, we have more red blood cells to transport more oxygen. Now, the downside of that is too many red blood cells makes our blood too thick, and that can cause some problems there. Another type of formed element are the leukocytes, and the leukocytes are the white blood cells. White blood cells are important in our immune system and immunity. So this is leukocytes, and actually I think it is B. And these are the white blood cells. Okay, so we know they're important in immunity. They defend our body against pathogens. They identify cancer cells and gets rid of them. Clean up. They do housekeeping. They clean up debris and dead cells. And they have nuclei. So unlike the erythrocytes, they have a mature white blood cell will have a nucleus. There are 5 different types of white blood cells that you need to know. And we can put them into 2 different categories. The first category are the polymorphonuclear granulocytes. Okay, poly, many shaped, morpho, nuclei, and they have granules. Okay, so now we have these white blood cells whose nuclei are strangely shaped with granules, and there are 3 of them. The first one are the neutrophils. And the neutrophils are by far the most common, comprising about 60 to 70% of all white blood cells. They're usually first on the scene in a bacterial infection, and they are phagocytic cells. So phagocytes, meaning they come in and they will engulf and get rid of bacteria and debris, etc. Okay. The second type are called eosinophils. Where do you get the term neutrophils? It's because they stain in neutral conditions. The granules stain. Okay, so granules stain in neutral conditions. Eosinophils, the granules stain with a stain called eosin, which is pink or bright red granules. So it's easy to see them when you look at them under the microscope, because the granules stain bright pink or red. These are way less common than the neutrophils. They're only about 4 to 6% of white blood cells. And you see them if you have an allergic reaction or parasitic infection. I used to work for a vet, and one of the things we look for is a high eosinophil count if that dog or cat has parasites. And that's one of the things I did, was I looked at under the microscope for the different types of white blood cells, and I would have to count them, and that's called a differential, when you count the different types of white blood cells. The last of the polymorphonuclear granulocytes are the basophils. The basophils stain in basic conditions. higher pHs. This is conditions. Hard to find these. They're only like 0.5%, 0.5 to 1% of all white blood cells. And you see these during inflammation or allergic reactions. Inflammation or allergy. They release histamine, which causes, which is important in the inflammatory response. If you have allergies, you take an antihistamine to prevent the release of histamine, which causes, you know, the drippy nose and the, you know, those types of symptoms when you get when you have allergies. All right, so that's the basophils. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next category of leukocytes, and these are the mononuclear granulocytes. What does that tell us? It tells you that the nucleus is not weird shape. It's got one regular nucleus and it does not have granules. So there are two types of mononuclear granulocytes. These are the lymphocytes. These are small, with round, very round nuclei. Makes about 20 to 25%. So we see quite a bit of those in the blood. These small, it's almost the size of a red blood cell, not quite. Smallest with large round nucleus. No granules. Okay. There are three types. The T cells, T lymphocytes. The B lymphocytes. And the B lymphocytes make antibodies. T lymphocytes, there's different types of them. They're really important in the immune response. B lymphocytes make antibodies. And the natural killer cells, or NK cells, which attack foreign invaders. The other type of mononuclear granulocytes are the monocytes. We find them about 3 to 8% of all white blood cells, and let's see, the nuclei are oval shaped or kidney bean shaped sometimes, and they're actually quite large. The monocytes are very large and important in immunity or defense of the body. They mature into macrophages. Macrophages are big eaters, phagocytes, and they are mature monocytes. All right. Or I should say develop from monocytes. The last category of formed element are the thrombocytes, which are the platelets. They are actually pieces of cell. The cell are the megakaryocytes, and they're important for blood clotting. They play a role in the clotting of blood. All right, I hope that was helpful.